If you've ever wondered how to turn chords into a solo, or you just want to get really good at navigating your way through chord changes, then you are definitely going to want to check out this tutorial. What's up, everybody? My name is Scott Paddock, and today I'm going to show you how to play chord outline solos. So once you learn how to improvise, in other words, make things up from scratch, the real work begins, and that is figuring out how to follow the chord changes. Figuring out how to follow the chord changes. That is the most daunting task of new improvisers. And it's actually a lot easier to do than you would think, especially if you use this simple method that I'm getting ready to show you. So the first thing that you need to be able to do is what I call play chord outlines. So playing chord outlines is just when you play chord tones as quarter notes over the chord progression of the song you're trying to improvise over. Now, obviously, to be able to do this, you need to already know how to read chord symbols. If you don't understand how chord symbols work or how chords work, I have done other videos on that. I'll put a link in the description. But assuming you know how to improvise and you have a basic idea of what a chord is and how they work, then you are definitely going to be ready for this step. For this demonstration, I am going to use the G blues progression. For the G blues progression, we only have 3 chords. We have a G7 chord, and the notes in that are G, B, D, and F. We have a C7 chord, and the notes in that are C, E, G, and B flat. And we have a D7 chord. The notes in that are D, F sharp, A, and C. So this is going to be a really great one to start on because we don't have that many chords, and the chords that we do have are fairly easy. Okay, so the first step is play a chord outline. So all we're going to do is play the chord tones as quarter notes. So we have 4 chord tones, G, B, D, and F in this first chord, which is a G7. So that'll give us 4 beats. So I'm just going to play this. Then I go on to a C7, so I'm going to switch the chord, and I'm going to play C, E, G, B flat. So I'm going to play my first 2 measures. I'm going to play a G7 and a C7. So I'm going to play G, B, D, F, and then C, E, G, B flat. So I'm going to play the chord tones in each chord. When I do that, you can definitely hear the chord movement. So the next chord is back to a G7, but this time we have it for 2 measures. When we have it for 2 measures, we're going to go up and down. So I'm going to play G, B, D, F. And then I'm going to play my high G and come back down. So I'm going to play G, F, D, B. So if I put that together, I'm going to play G, B, D, F, and then go down G, F, D, B. So I'm going to play my whole first line. Then I go to the second line. I have the C7 for 2 measures, so I'm going to go up and down. The G7 for 2 measures, up and down. Then for this third line, I have a D7 for 1 measure, so I'm just going to go up. A C7 for 1 measure, so I'm just going to go up. And a G7 for 2 measures, so I'm going to go up and down. So this first step is pretty easy. We're just going to play chord outline so we can get used to the movement of the chords or the chord progression in this tune. So I'm going to play a chord outline of the whole progression. When I play that chord outline, you can definitely hear the chords move. And as you practice the chord outline, you're going to get really comfortable with this chord progression, and you're really going to be locking in and getting comfortable with these chord tones. So that's super important. Now, what I just played was a chord outline over the chord progression, but that did not sound like a solo at all. So the next step is to play the exact same thing, but this time I'm going to switch up the rhythm and I'm going to repeat some notes. So I'm still going to play the notes in the same order. I'm going to play the same notes in the same order, but this time I'm going to repeat some of the notes and I'm going to change up the rhythm. It'll sound like this. I'm playing the same notes in the same order, but I'm just repeating some of the notes and changing up the rhythm, and that definitely makes it feel a whole lot more like a solo. So I'm going to do this step over the entire progression, and it's not going to sound like a full-on solo, but it's definitely going to be have that vibe of an improvised solo. If you're watching this video, I'm guessing that you would like to get a whole lot better at improvising over chords. If that's the case, then I'd like to invite you to come check out the Scott Paddock Sax School. In my sax school, I have entire courses dedicated to improvisation. It starts off at the very beginning where I teach you one-note solos, and then we progress all the way up to soloing over advanced chord progressions. So if you're just starting your improv journey or you'd like to take it to the next level, stop by the Scott Paddock Sax School. I'll put a link in the video description below. That definitely sounds a whole lot more like a solo, and all I'm doing is changing the rhythm a little bit and repeating some notes. So obviously when I'm saying repeating notes, I just mean I'll play 2 Gs or 2 Bs or 2 Ds over the G7. Or this time I'll play 2 Bs. This time I'm going to play 2 Ds. So I'm just repeating some notes to give me some more movement. And then of course I'm changing the rhythm so I'm not just playing straight quarter notes. Now you need to get this step down really well because in the next step we're going to turn it into a lot more of a solo, and to be able to do that you need to know your chord tones inside and out effortlessly, not thinking about them at all. So the third and final step is to play the notes out of order. So in other words, don't just go up G, B, D, F in that one octave. You can play any G, B, D, or F on your saxophone whenever you have a G7. So you can jump around in that chord. So it might sound like this. So that time I started on the high B, went to an F. So I'm just jumping around the chord instead of playing the notes in order. I'm jumping around. Then when I switch to the next chord, I'm going to jump around on that chord as well. That sounds a whole lot more like a solo. Take a listen to these first 4 bars. Notice I'm playing back and forth between some notes also. So I'm basically playing an improvised solo, but I'm only using chord tones as the notes that I'm playing. Here's another version of the first 4 bars. Now, in the beginning, this can be very difficult to get used to jumping around, so I suggest just practicing one chord at a time and playing around with those chord tones. As you work on this, you're going to realize that your rhythm is very important. If your rhythm isn't interesting, the solo is not going to sound interesting at all because you're limited to only 4 notes. That doesn't sound cool at all, so you're going to have to really work on coming up with interesting rhythms. I suggest working on just the G7, then just the C7, and then just the D7 to get them under your fingers. Now this is what a chord outline solo sounds like when I do it over the entire progression. So as you can hear, you can come up with some very creative solos just using chord tones, and it's really gonna lock your ear into the movement of the chord and get you focused in on chord tones. So when you go to improvise using your whole scale and throwing in chromaticism and all the other stuff, you're gonna be used to landing on your chord tones. They're just gonna be really locked in. Another benefit from working on chord outline solos is voice leading. When you are only using chord tones, voice leading becomes pretty easy to figure out because these notes are very close to each other. When you're doing voice leading, you usually want to be moving from one chord to the next in the smallest interval possible, most of the time by a half step. So when you're going from the G7 to the C7, when you play the B natural and the G7 to the B flat and the C7, it's a really natural sounding transition from one chord to the next. Of course, you could also go up to the C because that is a half step also. So your voice leading is going to get a lot better, and just your ability to land on chord tones is really going to get good when you work on chord outline solos. Now, once you get this down, of course, you can add in scales and chromaticism and all kinds of other improv techniques. But if you start learning every new song that you want to improvise on by first learning the chord outline, second, playing the chord outline with a rhythm so it sounds a little bit more improvised, and third, doing a chord outline solo, your improv on everything that you play is going to sound a whole lot better. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. If you'd like to dive deeper into my saxophone world, please check out the Scott Paddock Sax School.